My morning baker called me at 6:15, and she was not calling about flour. She was whispering, "Grace, he is in the back again. He is kneeling in front of the safe." I was standing in a Publix parking lot on Abercorn Street, holding a bag of vanilla extract in one hand and my phone in the other, watching my son-in-law on a 4-inch screen, crouched in front of my dead father's safe like he was cracking a code in a heist movie. Except this was not a movie. And that safe held the only thing my father left behind that money could not replace. I could give you the whole introduction right now. Name, age, shoe size, the name of his fantasy football team, his opinion on whether a hot dog is a sandwich. He has one, it is wrong. But honestly, none of that matters as much as what you just heard. My daughter's husband was on his knees in front of a safe in the back of my bakery at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning, while my morning baker stood 40 feet away in the front kitchen, icing a tray of lemon pound cakes. His name is Dylan. I am using a version of his real name because, well, you will understand why I am not giving you his actual name by the end of this. My name is Grace. I am 36 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I own a little place on Broughton Street called Holloway's. It is a bakery. Not a franchise, not a chain, not one of those places with a neon sign that says something cute about cupcakes. It is a real bakery. The kind where the front door sticks when it rains, and the display case has a crack in the bottom left corner that I keep meaning to fix and never do. We make everything from scratch: pecan pies, praline cookies, buttermilk biscuits, sweet potato bread, and a chocolate bourbon cake that once made a grown man cry at a funeral reception. "I am not exaggerating," he cried. His wife sent me a thank you card. Dolores called me first. Dolores Ramos. Everyone calls her D except me. I have always called her Dolores because that is her name, and she told me once that she preferred it, and I am the kind of person who remembers things like that and then never lets go of them. She is 63. She has been working in that bakery since my father ran it. And in all the years I have known that woman, I have never heard her voice shake. Dolores once chased a possum out of the pantry with a broom handle and a vocabulary that would make a longshoreman blush. She did not flinch, she did not hesitate. She swept that animal out the back door and then went back to rolling croissant dough like nothing happened. Nothing rattles Dolores. So when she called me at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning and her voice sounded like she was standing on a window ledge, I knew. "He is still back there," she said. "I can see him on the little screen." That little screen is actually a 9-inch monitor connected to our security camera system. 4 cameras. One in the front kitchen, one in the back prep area, one on the back door, and one on my office desk. I installed them 2 years ago after someone tried to pry the back door open at 3 in the morning. Cost me $280 at Best Buy, and I set them up myself, which means the desk camera is slightly tilted to the left, and everything on it looks like it is happening on the Titanic. But it works. Oh, it works. I pulled up the app on my phone right there in that parking lot. The morning sun was already pressing down on the asphalt the way Savannah sun does in October, heavy and wet and personal, like the weather has opinions about your day. And on my screen, in grainy black and white, I watched Dylan Marsh, my daughter Jess's husband, the man I made shrimp and grits for the first time he came to dinner, the man I hugged at their courthouse wedding 18 months ago. I watched him kneel in front of my father's safe and try a combination. He punched in 4 numbers. The handle did not move. He tried again. Different numbers. Nothing. He sat back on his heels and looked at the safe the way you look at a locked door when you know what is on the other side and you want it badly enough to keep trying. He did not know I was watching. He did not know the cameras were recording to the cloud. He did not know that I had set up the system with automatic backup because my father taught me that if something is important, it exists in 2 places. He did not know any of that. He just knew the combination was 4 digits, and he had not guessed it yet. Then something happened that made my stomach drop through the parking lot asphalt. On the camera, I saw the door to the front kitchen open. Dolores stepped into the back prep area. She had a tray of lemon pound cakes in her hands. She was not looking at Dylan. She was looking at the cakes. Dylan moved fast. Faster than I had ever seen him move, and I have watched this man take 45 minutes to parallel park a Hyundai Tucson. He stood up, grabbed a broom that was leaning against the wall, and started sweeping the floor, just like that. Kneeling in front of a safe 1 second, sweeping the floor the next, like he had been cleaning the whole time, like he was just a helpful son-in-law tidying up before the morning rush. Dolores looked at him. I could not hear what she said because the camera does not have audio in the back prep area, only in the office. But I could read her body language. She tilted her head the way she does when something does not add up. The way she tilts it when a customer claims they ordered a dozen, when they ordered a half dozen, it is a specific tilt. It says, I see you and I do not believe you, but I am too polite to say it out loud. Dylan said something, smiled, pointed at the broom. Dolores nodded slowly, set the tray down, and walked back to the front, but she pulled out her phone before the door closed behind her. And 12 seconds later, my phone was ringing. I stood in that Publix parking lot for another 3 minutes after I hung up with Dolores. The vanilla extract was getting warm in the bag. A woman with a shopping cart gave me a look that said, Are you okay, honey? Because you have been standing in the same spot staring at your phone like it just told you something terrible. She was not wrong. I could give you his whole resume right now. Age, shoe size, the name of his fantasy football team. But none of that matters as much as what you just saw. My daughter's husband was on his knees in front of my dead father's safe, and the cameras caught every second. Dylan Marsh is 28 years old. He works as a real estate agent for a small brokerage in Pooler, which is about 20 minutes west of Savannah if you drive the speed limit, and about 14 if you drive like Dylan, which is to say, with the confidence of a man who believes turn signals are optional and merging is a competitive sport. He makes about $43,000 a year, drives a silver Hyundai Tucson with a scratch on the passenger side that he told my daughter happened in a parking lot, though I have my doubts because that scratch has a very specific shape that says I misjudged a drive-through and I am never going to admit it. And he is the kind of guy who orders the second cheapest wine at dinner and acts like he is treating you to a vineyard tour in Napa Valley. I wanted to like him, I really did. When my daughter Jess brought him home the first time, I made shrimp and grits. Now, if you know me, shrimp and grits is my version of rolling out the red carpet. It is not a casual meal. It takes me 3 hours. I make the grits from stone-ground cornmeal that I buy from a farm stand on Skidaway Road, and the shrimp comes from a guy named Hector at the city market, who knows me by name and always throws in an extra quarter pound because I once brought him a pecan pie on his birthday. Shrimp and grits means I care. Shrimp and grits means I am trying. Dylan ate 2.5 helpings, complimented the seasoning, and asked for the recipe, which I thought was charming at the time. He does that. He asks for things in a way that sounds like interest but is actually inventory. I did not know the difference yet. I said thank you, gave him the recipe on an index card, and thought, okay, maybe this one is all right. He was not all right, but I did not know that yet. My daughter is Jessica Holloway Marsh. She is 21. She got married young, too young if you ask me, but nobody asked me, which is a recurring theme in this story. She is a student at the Savannah College of Art and Design, which everyone around here just calls SCAD, studying graphic design. She is talented. She once redesigned the Holloway's logo for a class project, and it was so good I actually used it. It is on the front window right now. She has her father's eye for detail and my inability to say no to dessert. Jess has the conflict tolerance of a golden retriever. She wants everyone to be happy. She wants me and Dylan to be close. She wants the holidays to be warm and the dinners to be long and nobody to raise their voice ever, which is a beautiful dream for a person who has never met my side of the family. The Holloways are not quiet people. My father could argue about the correct way to slice a tomato for 45 minutes and enjoy every second of it. Jess did not inherit that gene. She inherited the one that says, let us all just get along, and she carries it like a shield. She texted me heart emojis after that first dinner. Dylan loved the grits, Mom. 3 exclamation points. My daughter communicates exclusively in exclamation points. Everything is exciting. Everything is wonderful. Dylan is wonderful. The grits were wonderful. Life is wonderful. I do not know where she gets the energy for all that enthusiasm, but I suspect it is genetic because my mother was the same way. She could find something wonderful about a flat tire. For a while, Dylan was just Dylan. Fine. Not great, not terrible. The human equivalent of store-brand decaf. It will get you through the morning, but you would not write a review about it. He showed up for Sunday dinners, helped Jess move when her apartment lease changed, I remembered my birthday with a gift card to a restaurant I have never been to and probably never will because it is 45 minutes away and I do not drive 45 minutes for pasta. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what Dylan did to my shop, you need to understand what that shop is. Because it is not a business. It is not inventory and revenue and quarterly taxes. It is a living room with an oven. Holloway's sits on the corner of Broughton and Drayton, in a building my father bought in 2002 for $112,000. That was a lot of money for a man who had spent his entire career making pastries for other people's celebrations. Not exactly a profession that puts you in a tax bracket worth bragging about. He borrowed from his sister, took out a small business loan from a credit union in Pooler, and signed the papers on a Thursday afternoon. I know it was a Thursday, because he kept the receipt taped inside the front cover of his recipe ledger, the one he used to track every single order he ever filled. Date, client, cake type, ingredients, cost. He started that ledger in 1991. I still use it. My handwriting looks terrible next to his, but that is a different problem. The bakery smells like butter at all times. Even when we are not baking, which is almost never, but on the rare occasion when the ovens are off and the kitchen is empty, it still smells like butter. I think the walls have absorbed it. 20-something years of croissants and pie crusts and buttercream frosting have soaked into the plaster and the wood and the old tile floor until the building itself became a pastry. There is vanilla in there too, and the faint sweetness of powdered sugar that never quite settles, and the lavender hand cream that Dolores has been using since the Clinton administration. The first Clinton. There are baked goods on every surface, display cases full of pies and cakes and tarts, cooling racks lined with cookies, a bread shelf by the window where the morning light hits the sourdough loaves and makes them glow like something out of a painting. Some items are for sale, some are experiments, some have been sitting on the back counter so long that nobody remembers who made them or why, and at this point they are basically decorative. My father used to play jazz in the kitchen while he worked. Not loud, just enough that you could hear it if you stood still. Miles Davis mostly, and Chet Baker on Sunday mornings. I still play it. The little Bluetooth speaker sits on the shelf above the stand mixer, and some mornings when the music is going and the ovens are warm and the butter smell is thick and the light is coming through the front window just right, I swear I can feel him in the room. Not see him. Feel him. The way you feel someone standing behind you before you turn around. And somewhere behind the walk-in cooler, bolted to the floor with 4 steel anchors that my father drilled himself, is a safe. It is not large. About the size of a mini fridge. Gray steel, combination lock, 4 digits. My father installed it in 1998, 3 years before I was old enough to know what was inside. I will tell you what is inside, but first, you need to understand the man who put it there, because that safe is not just a box. It is the last promise my father ever made, and Dylan Marsh was trying to break it open. The safe does not hold money. I need you to know that right away, because I think when most people hear the word safe, they picture stacks of cash or gold bars or a diamond necklace in a velvet box. This is Savannah, Georgia, not a James Bond movie. There are no gold bars. There is no diamond. What is inside that safe is worth more than all of that combined, and if you told me I could trade it for $1 million in crisp hundreds, I would laugh in your face and then probably apologize because my mother raised me to be polite, even when I am being defiant. Inside the safe is a recipe book. Not a cookbook. Not a spiral-bound collection of Pinterest printouts. A recipe book. Handwritten. 214 pages. My father's handwriting on every single one. Blue ink, mostly, though he switched to black around 2008 when his favorite pen was discontinued, and he spent 3 weeks being quietly devastated about it before Dolores ordered him a box of the closest match she could find online. He never admitted they were different, but I could tell. The letters were a little thinner, a little less sure of themselves, but the recipes were the same. My father, Raymond Holloway, was not a famous chef. He was not on television. He did not have a cookbook deal or a podcast or a following on any platform that requires you to take pictures of your food before you eat it. He was a baker, a real one. The kind who woke up at 4 a.m, 6 days a week for 31 years to make things from scratch for people he mostly knew by name. Birthday cakes for kids who grew up and came back for their own kids' birthday cakes. Wedding cakes for couples who came back for anniversary cakes. Funeral cakes for families who came back because the food was the only good part of the worst day of their lives. He started the recipe book in 1989. He was 26, the same age Dylan is now, which is a comparison I try not to think about too often because it makes me want to throw something. He wrote the first entry on a Tuesday. I know this because he dated everything. Top right corner of every page. Day, month, year. Sometimes he added the weather. Sometimes he added a note about who the recipe was for. Sometimes he added something that had nothing to do with baking at all. Page 14, for example, is his brown butter pecan shortbread. Underneath the ingredient list, in smaller handwriting that you have to tilt the page to read, he wrote, "Grace took her first steps today. Fell into the flour bin. Looked like a little ghost. Cried for 10 minutes. Then laughed. Then cried again. She is going to be a handful." He was not wrong. Page 41 is his lemon chess pie, which a restaurant critic from the Savannah Morning News once called transcendent, a word my father never used because he said it sounded like something a person says when they do not actually know what something tastes like. Underneath the baking instructions, he wrote, "Dolores started today. She burned the first batch of rolls, did not apologize, just made another batch. I think she is going to work out." That was 1997. Dolores has been there ever since. Page 87 is a sweet potato layer cake that he developed for a customer whose mother had passed away and who wanted something that tasted like her childhood kitchen. My father spent 2 weeks on that recipe. Tested it 9 times. On the 10th version, the customer sat in the bakery, took one bite, and started crying. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind where your body remembers something your brain forgot. My father wrote underneath the recipe, "She said it tasted like her mother's hands." I do not know what that means exactly, but I think it might be the best thing anyone has ever said about my food. There are 214 recipes in that book. Every one of them has a story written in the margins. Birthdays, weddings, funerals, first steps, last meals, apologies, celebrations, the kind of ordinary miracles that happen in a bakery if you pay attention long enough. That book is not a collection of ingredients. It is my father's autobiography, written in butter and sugar and flour, 1 page at a time, over the course of 30 years. It was appraised 2 years ago at $85,000 by a culinary collectibles specialist in Atlanta, who said the combination of original recipes, historical documentation, and personal annotations made it, and I am quoting here, "an extraordinary artifact of American regional baking." My father would have hated that sentence. He would have said, "It is just a recipe book, Grace. Do not make it weird." But he also would have smiled when he said it. The small smile he saved for things that mattered more than he wanted to admit. The appraisal was $85,000. But that number does not mean anything. Not to me. You cannot appraise the handwriting of a dead man. You cannot put a dollar sign on the way he crossed his T's or the little flour smudges on page 112, where he clearly forgot to wash his hands before writing. You cannot sell the margins. You cannot auction off the notes about my first steps or Dolores burning the rolls or the woman whose cake tasted like her mother's hands. Those things are not inventory. Those things are him. My father died of a heart attack 2 years ago in the kitchen of the bakery. It was a Thursday. Dolores found him. He was on the floor next to the big stand mixer, the one he bought secondhand in 2005, and rebuilt himself because the motor was shot, and he said buying a new one was wasteful when this one just needed some attention. He was right about the mixer. It still works. I use it every day. The paramedics came in 7 minutes. They tried for 22 minutes. I know because Dolores counted. She stood in the corner of that kitchen and counted every single minute because she said someone should be keeping track, and the clocks in the kitchen were all set to different times because my father believed that a baker should never know exactly what time it is. He said it made you rush. He preferred to go by smell. When the bread smells right, it is done. When the pie crust smells like it is about to turn, you have 45 seconds. Time is a suggestion. Smell is the truth. When the paramedics stopped, when Dolores finally stopped counting, the recipe book was lying open on the counter next to the cooling rack, page 1, the first recipe my father ever wrote down, chocolate pecan pie. His handwriting was young and certain on that page, the way handwriting is before life teaches you to hesitate. And in the margin, in blue ink that has faded just slightly over 30 years, he wrote, "This one is for Grace. She will not eat it until she is 4, but I am writing it now so I do not forget. I do not want to forget anything." I put the book in the safe that evening. I changed the combination to something only I would know. 4 digits. The month and year of my father's first entry. I locked it. I walked out. I did not open the safe again for 6 months, because every time I touched the dial, I could feel his fingerprints underneath mine, and I was not ready for that yet. That book was still in the safe. Or it was, until Dylan figured out that a 4-digit combination is not as secure as a dead man thought it would be. About 7 weeks before the day I am telling you about, Dylan started showing up at the bakery. The first time was a Saturday. He walked in around 9 in the morning carrying 2 large coffees from the gas station across the street on Drayton, the one with the squeaky door and the hot dog roller that I am fairly certain has not been cleaned since the last presidential administration. He handed one to me and one to Dolores and said, "Thought you ladies could use a pick-me-up." The coffee tasted like someone had brewed it inside a rubber tire and then left it on a dashboard for 3 hours. But it was the thought that counted, and I am the kind of person who will drink terrible coffee with a smile if it means not hurting someone's feelings. That is either a virtue or a disease. I have not decided which. Dylan said he wanted to help around the shop, learn about the business, maybe bond with me a little. He said Jess talks about the bakery all the time, and he wanted to understand what makes it so special. He used the word special. He looked me right in the eyes when he said it, and I thought, this is a man who is making an effort. I was, and I need you to hear how embarrassed I am to say this. I was touched. Jess was so happy about it. She texted me that afternoon with 3 heart emojis and a message that said, "Dylan says he loves the bakery, Mom. He says it smells like home." 3 exclamation points. Then, "I am so glad you two are bonding." 5 exclamation points. Then a string of emojis that I think were supposed to represent baked goods but looked more like a fever dream about breakfast. My daughter could find enthusiasm in a parking ticket. So I put Dylan to work. He was terrible at it. The man has the spatial awareness of a shopping cart with a broken wheel. The first week, he was moving a rack of cupcakes, 3 dozen vanilla bourbon cupcakes with cream cheese frosting that I had spent 4 hours decorating for a wedding reception in Thunderbolt, and he caught the edge of the rack on the prep table, and the whole thing lurched sideways. I aged 10 years in 2 seconds. My whole life flashed before my eyes, and most of it was frosting. He caught it, barely. I made him move to box duty after that. But he kept showing up. Saturdays first, then a Wednesday, then a Friday. He moved boxes, swept floors, organized the dry storage shelves, and wiped down the display cases with the wrong cleaner twice before Dolores physically took the bottle out of his hand and pointed at the correct one without a word. Dolores communicates more in a single pointed finger than most people do in a paragraph. I should have paid more attention to what he was actually doing during those visits, but I was busy. I had a backlog that would have made a factory manager weep. 2 wedding cakes, one for a couple in Tybee Island who wanted a 5-tier lemon elderflower with edible gold leaf, which sounds beautiful until you are applying it at 2 in the morning with tweezers and a prayer. A corporate order for 300 mini pecan tarts. A custom birthday cake shaped like the Savannah Bananas mascot for a 6-year-old, which required me to learn what that mascot looks like, and sculpting a dancing banana out of fondant at midnight is a humbling experience. I was working 12-hour days some weeks, 14 on the bad ones. When Dylan offered to organize the storage shelves in the back prep area, the area directly behind the walk-in cooler, the area where the safe is, I said sure and went back to my bench. Here is the thing about the back prep area. That is where everything important lives. My bench, my tools, my pastry bags, my digital scale that cost $220 and is the one piece of equipment I would save in a fire after the recipe book. And right there, next to the walk-in cooler door where the afternoon light hits the steel, sits the safe, bolted to the floor. 4 digits. My father's last promise. It was never hidden. I never thought it needed to be. Dylan asked me once, casually, over those gas station coffees. So like, if something happened to you, what happens to all this stuff? Does Jess get it? I said yes. Everything goes to Jess. The bakery, the building, the inventory, the name, it is all in my will. I had it drawn up 6 months after my father died because Cal Pemberton, my accountant, told me I needed to, and Cal is the kind of man who says you need to in a voice that makes you feel like you have already disappointed him by not doing it sooner. Dylan nodded, took a sip of his terrible coffee, said, "That is good. That is really smart. You are planning ahead. I like that." I thought he was being supportive. I thought he was thinking about Jess's future. He was calculating price tags. Meanwhile, and this is the first thread of about 3 things that were all going sideways at the same time, Dolores started mentioning her knees. She is 63. She has been standing on tile floors for over 15 years, and her left knee sounds like a bag of gravel when she goes down the steps to the storage basement. She had been saying things like, "I might need to slow down a little, and maybe I should look into a part-time arrangement." She never said she was quitting. She said she might cut back to 3 days instead of 5. That is not quitting. That is a scheduling adjustment. Dolores has been making scheduling adjustments since before my daughter was born. But Dylan was there when she said it. He was reorganizing a shelf of baking molds near the back wall. He did not even look up. He was counting copper tart pans and writing something on his phone. He heard every word. I thought he was trying to bond with me. I thought he was showing up for my daughter. He was measuring the inventory. And I handed him the tape measure. The day Dolores called me, that Tuesday, I drove back from that Publix parking lot so fast, I am surprised I did not get pulled over. I have a 2020 Chevy Colorado with a dent on the rear bumper from when I backed into my own mailbox last March, and that truck is not built for highway heroics. But I made the 45-minute drive back to Savannah in just under 30. I did not go to the bakery first. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that I made too strong because my hands were shaking and I overscooped the grounds. And I pulled up every frame of security camera footage from the last 2 weeks, and that is when the real picture started forming. Because the thing about Dylan kneeling in front of the safe that morning, that was bad. That was a punch to the sternum. But the footage from before that day, that was the part that made me go cold. 10 days before that Tuesday, Dylan had come by the bakery on a Thursday afternoon. I was at a dentist appointment. Crown replacement on my lower left molar, which cost me $920 even with insurance, and yes, I am still mad about it. My dentist has a framed poster on the ceiling that says, "Smile, you are in good hands," and I stared at that poster for 45 minutes while a man drilled into my jaw and charged me almost $1,000 for the privilege. Dentistry is a legal crime. Dolores was at lunch. She takes lunch from 12:30 to 1:30 every day. She goes to the same sandwich shop on Congress Street, orders the same turkey and Swiss on rye, and reads the same daily crossword from the Savannah Morning News. She has been doing this since 2009. I could set a clock by her lunch schedule, which is ironic because my father could never set a clock by anything. He went by smell, remember. The bakery was technically closed for the hour, but Dylan had a key. Jess gave it to him months ago. In case of emergencies, she said. Apparently his definition of emergency was different from mine. The camera over my desk, the one that is slightly tilted to the left because I installed it myself like a person who definitely should have hired somebody, that camera caught Dylan sitting at my desk, opening drawers. He went through the top drawer first. Nothing interesting there. Just pens, sticky notes, a roll of stamps, a dried-out highlighter I keep meaning to throw away, and 4 packets of hot sauce from Taco Bell that have been in that drawer so long they might qualify for historical preservation status. The top drawer is where ambition goes to die. Then he tried the second drawer. It stuck. It always sticks. You have to pull it at an angle, kind of lift and tug at the same time, like you are negotiating with a stubborn child. He gave up after about 10 seconds, just pushed it back in and stood up. Looked around the office. Checked the hallway. Left. The second drawer is where I keep my appraisal folder. He came back 6 days later. This time, he knew Dolores would be in the front kitchen. He told her he was just grabbing something from the back for Grace. Dolores did not question it. Why would she? He is family. This time, he figured out the drawer. He pulled it at an angle, lifted slightly, and it slid open. Someone told him how to do it, or he watched me do it during one of his helpful Saturday visits and filed it away in whatever part of his brain is dedicated to future theft. I do not know which. Both options make me sick. Inside the drawer was a manila folder labeled Insurance Inventory. Inside that folder is an appraisal for every item in the bakery worth more than $500. The recipe book, $85,000. A set of antique copper baking molds from the 1890s that my father collected over 20 years, $4,200. A 1950s KitchenAid stand mixer, the original model with the chrome finish that collectors go crazy for, $2,800. A set of vintage Wusthof knives that belonged to my father's mentor, $3,100. A hand-painted porcelain cake stand from France that a customer gave my father as a thank you in 2001, $1,900. Everything listed: values, dates, condition notes, photographs. I watched Dylan photograph 14 pages. He was fast. He had his phone angled down and he flipped through that folder like a man who had practiced. Snap, flip, snap, flip. Took him under 4 minutes. Then he put the folder back in the drawer, pushed it closed, and walked out of the office like nothing happened. He stopped in the front kitchen, said something to Dolores that made her nod, and left through the front door. Casual. Easy. The way you leave a place you have every right to be in. Except he did not have every right, and the camera caught every snap, every flip, every page. I watched that footage 3 times. The first time I watched it, I felt sick. The second time, I felt angry. The third time, I felt something worse than both of those. I felt stupid. Because I had let him in. I had given him access. I had watched him reorganize my shelves and count my copper molds and ask questions about my will, and I had thought he was being sweet. I had told my daughter I was glad he was coming around. I had drunk his terrible gas station coffee and smiled. Then I found the sticky note, tucked half under the keyboard, in handwriting that was not mine and was not Dolores's. And my coffee went cold for the first time that night. It would not be the last. The sticky note was small, yellow, the kind you buy in a pack of 12 at an office supply store and use for grocery lists and dentist reminders and all the unremarkable little tasks that make up a life. But there was nothing unremarkable about what was written on it. Holloway recipes, 85 kV Sable, ATL cash. Dylan's handwriting, neat, small, all capitals. The kind of handwriting that belongs to a man who thinks neatness counts as a personality trait. I have seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the one time he left a note on the fridge at Jess's apartment that said, "Babe, we are out of protein powder," and somehow made it look like a corporate memo. That handwriting was unmistakable, and it was sitting on my desk, half tucked under my keyboard, like he had written it while sitting in my chair, at my desk, in my shop, and then forgotten to take it with him. 85K, the exact appraisal value of my father's recipe book. V. Sable, a name I did not recognize. ATL, Atlanta, cash. I stared at that sticky note for so long my coffee went cold. I microwaved it. It went cold again. I microwaved it a second time. It went cold a third time. 3 cups of cold coffee is my personal record for staring at a piece of paper and trying to convince myself that I am not seeing what I am seeing. The next morning, I called Cal Pemberton before I even turned on the oven. Cal is my accountant. He is 60 years old. He has been doing my taxes and my father's taxes before me since 2004. He has an office in Pooler that smells like paper and old carpet and those butterscotch candies he keeps in a glass dish on the corner of his desk. I am fairly certain that dish has been there since 2008. Nobody eats the candy. The candy is decorative at this point. It might be load-bearing. If you remove the candy, the desk might collapse. Cal, hypothetically, I said, if someone photographed all of my inventory appraisals and then started trying to sell pieces without my knowledge, what am I dealing with? Cal said, Grace, hypothetically is a word people use when they already know the answer and wish they did not. He explained it to me straight. Dylan could not sell my building. He could not forge a property transfer. He could not touch the business account. All of that requires my signature, my identification, notarized documents. But individual items from the bakery, that was different. If Dylan had physical access to the shop, which he did because he had a key, and a buyer who dealt in cash and did not ask too many questions, he could walk out with something today and sell it tomorrow. And unless I checked my inventory daily, which I do not because I am too busy sculpting fondant bananas at midnight, I might not notice for weeks. I told Cal about the sticky note, about V-Sable and ATL Cash. Cal was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You need to find out who V-Sable is." So I did. It took me about 40 minutes of searching online to find him. Victor Sable. He runs a booth at the Atlanta Antique Market on Peachtree Road. Specializes in culinary collectibles, estate kitchen pieces, vintage cookware, and what his website calls ephemera of American food culture, which is a phrase my father would have mocked relentlessly. Victor also deals in rare recipe collections and manuscript cookbooks. The kind of things that sell to private collectors and museum archives for the kind of money that makes normal people blink. I drove to Atlanta the next day, 2.5 hours each way. I left Dolores in charge and told her I had a supplier meeting, which was not entirely a lie because I was meeting someone who was about to supply me with information I desperately needed. Victor Sable has the demeanor of a man who has spent 30 years buying things from people having the worst week of their lives. He is not unkind, he is just careful. He is 55, wears reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and has the kind of beard that says, "I attend farmers markets recreationally." When I walked into his booth at the Atlanta Antique Market, he looked at me the way a man looks at a plate of food he is not sure is still good. "Victor," I said, "did someone contact you recently about a recipe collection from Savannah, handwritten 200-plus pages, appraised at $85,000? He adjusted his reading glasses. "I get a lot of inquiries. This one would have come from a Gmail address you do not recognize, and the seller would have mentioned a family collection." Victor stopped adjusting his glasses. "How do you know about that?" He showed me the email on his phone. The address was a burner, Gmail, nothing I recognized, just a string of letters and numbers, but the message referenced specific appraisal values. $85,000 for the recipe book. $4,200 for the copper molds. Those numbers were exact matches for what was in my folder, the folder Dylan photographed. The writing style had Dylan all over it. Overly formal, trying too hard, the kind of email a 28-year-old real estate agent writes when he is pretending to be a legitimate estate dealer. He spelled artisanal wrong. Twice. 2 different ways. Victor had offered $52,000 for the recipe book. Dealer price well below appraisal, but enough cash that Dylan could cover most of his debts and still have breathing room. I did not know about the debts yet. That came later. But the math was already telling a story I did not want to read. Dylan was planning to sell my father's recipe book to Victor Sable for $52,000 cash. Enough to disappear a lifetime of handwritten recipes into a collector's vault where nobody would ever bake from them again. But that was not even the worst part. I just did not know the rest yet. I got back from Atlanta on a Wednesday evening. I had not eaten since breakfast, because when your brain is busy processing the fact that your son-in-law is planning to sell your dead father's recipe book to a stranger for $52,000, your stomach tends to lose interest in food. I sat in my truck in the driveway for 10 minutes doing nothing, just sitting, just existing in the specific kind of silence that happens when you know something terrible and you have not figured out what to do about it yet. The next morning, I went to the bakery early, 5:45. I wanted to be there before anyone else, so I could sit at my desk and think without Dolores asking me what was wrong. Because Dolores can read my face the way most people read a stop sign, immediately and without ambiguity. I was not ready to tell her everything yet. I was still assembling the pieces. But Dolores beat me there. Of course she did. She was already behind the counter when I walked in, flour on her apron, hair pinned back, coffee in hand, looking like a woman who had been awake since 4 and was not about to explain why. She did not say good morning. She said, "What is this on your desk?" I walked to the back. On my desk, next to the keyboard where the sticky note had been, was a printed email, 2 pages, stapled in the top left corner. The letterhead said Anderson and Keyes Law Group, Intellectual Property Division, Atlanta, Georgia. I do not remember sitting down. I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was in my chair reading the email with Dolores standing over my shoulder, and the bakery was very quiet, except for the hum of the walk-in cooler and the sound of my own heartbeat, doing something it probably should not have been doing at 5:50 in the morning. The email was addressed to me. It was professional, polished, full of legal language that sounded important and authoritative and entirely legitimate. It explained that as the owner of a small business containing significant intellectual property, I should consider protecting my proprietary recipes through a formal registration process. Attached was a document titled Intellectual Property Protection Agreement. The email recommended I sign and return the document to secure my recipes against unauthorized reproduction. It sounded reasonable. It sounded smart. It sounded like exactly the kind of thing a responsible business owner should do. And then I remembered something. About a week earlier, Dylan had been in the bakery on a Saturday morning, drinking his terrible gas station coffee, and he had said casually, almost offhandedly, "You know, Grace, you should really protect those recipes legally. People steal formulas all the time. I hear about it in real estate more than you would think. You should look into some kind of intellectual property thing." At the time, I had nodded and said, "Yeah, maybe I should." The way you agree with someone when you are elbow deep in cake batter and not really listening? I called Cal Pemberton from my desk at 6:15 in the morning. Cal picked up on the second ring, which told me he was already awake, already at his desk, already surrounded by butterscotch candies that nobody eats. I read him the email and the attached document, word by word. Cal was quiet for about 30 seconds. Then he said, "Grace, this is not an intellectual property protection agreement. This is a transfer of ownership. Whoever drafted this document is asking you to sign over the copyright and commercial reproduction rights to every recipe in your collection to an entity called Magnolia Provisions LLC. I have never heard of Magnolia Provisions LLC. Have you? No. If you sign this, you no longer own your recipes. Whoever controls that LLC does, they could sell the rights. They could license them to a restaurant chain, a publishing house, a food manufacturer. They could reproduce every recipe in your father's book, and you would have no legal claim to any of it." I felt the floor tilt, not physically, but something inside me shifted, the way a building shifts right before it comes down, because 3 days before that morning, that document had been sitting on my desk, and I had picked it up. I had read the first paragraph. I had thought, this looks official, maybe I should sign this. And I was reaching for a pen when Dolores had walked past my desk and said, "What is that?" "Nothing," I had said. "Just some legal thing for the business." She had tilted her head. The same tilt she gave Dylan when he was pretending to sweep. She had said. And then she had walked away, and I had put the paper down and gone back to work and forgotten about it. If Dolores had not walked past my desk at that exact moment, if she had been 2 minutes later, or in the front instead of the back, or if she had not tilted her head in that specific way that made me hesitate for just long enough, I would have signed it. I would have signed away 214 recipes, 30 years of my father's handwriting, every birthday cake and funeral cake and midnight experiment he ever created, to a shell company that almost certainly led back to Dylan Marsh. The dual scheme came into focus like a photograph developing in a dark room. Sell the physical recipe book to Victor Sable for $52,000 cash. Simultaneously trick me into signing away the intellectual property rights to a company connected to a restaurant chain, willing to pay $120,000 for commercial reproduction rights. The same recipes, monetized twice. And I would have been the one who signed the paper. I called Victor that afternoon. "Victor," I said, "that meeting we discussed, I need you to schedule it. In my bakery, on my cameras, and I need you to ask him about additional pieces. And paperwork. Use the word paperwork." Victor was quiet for a moment. "Grace, I sell cookbooks and credenzas for a living. I am not a law enforcement operative. You are not. You are a buyer meeting a seller. That is what you do every day. You are just doing it in my shop instead of yours." He sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had lived 55 years without drama and was watching his streak come to an end. "Fine. When?" "Tuesday. 1 o'clock. And if he gets suspicious?" "He will not. He thinks I am a sad woman who is too busy crying over a recipe book to notice he is gutting my shop. That is his blind spot. He thinks I am too emotional to be dangerous." Victor paused. Then he said, "Your father would have handled this differently. My father would have hit him with a rolling pin." Exactly. So now I had a son-in-law who was stealing my inventory, forging legal documents, and lining up a cash buyer in Atlanta. And I had not even talked to my daughter yet. That was the next step, and it was the one I was not ready for. I drove to Jess's apartment on a Wednesday evening. She and Dylan rent a 2-bedroom and pooler, second floor, beige carpet that was already beige when they moved in, and has since evolved into a shade I would describe as resigned. The balcony overlooks a Waffle House parking lot, which means that at any given hour of the day or night you can hear someone either very happy or very unhappy about their hash browns. It is not much. But Jess had put up curtains, yellow ones with little white daisies, and she had hung one of those wreaths with fake eucalyptus on the front door, and she had arranged a small herb garden on the balcony in pots she painted herself. She was proud of it, and that is what mattered. I brought peach cobbler, because when you are about to tell your daughter that her husband is a thief, you do not show up empty-handed. That felt rude, so I brought a dessert to a disaster. Emily Post would be proud, or horrified, probably both. The cobbler was still warm. I had made it that afternoon, partly because I needed something to bring, and partly because baking is how I process anxiety. Some people meditate, some people run. I cream butter and sugar together until my arm hurts and the world makes sense again. It does not always work, but at least I end up with cobbler. Jess opened the door and she looked different. Pale, tired. Not college tired, the kind where you have been up late studying and your eyes are a little puffy. A different kind of tired. The kind that lives in your bones. I did not register it right then. I was too focused on what I came to say. We sat at her little kitchen table. The one we found at a yard sale in Garden City for $40, one leg shorter than the others, fixed with a folded piece of cardboard underneath that Jess decorated with a smiley face in permanent marker because she said even furniture deserves encouragement. Everything Jess does not want to fix has character. That is what she says. That table has character. That leaky faucet has personality. That crack in the ceiling is vintage. I tried to ease into it. Honey, I need to talk to you about Dylan and the bakery. Her face changed immediately. Not angry, guarded, the way a drawbridge goes up. I had seen that face before. Usually when I said something about Dylan, that was not a compliment. Mom, please? No, listen. I have something specific. I found camera footage of Dylan going through my desk. He photographed my appraisal folder, every valuable piece in the bakery, Jess. And I found a sticky note on my desk in his handwriting with the appraised value of your grandfather's recipe book and a dealer's name in Atlanta. He has been emailing someone about selling it. Jess stared at me for a long time. Too long. Long enough that I thought maybe she was processing it. Maybe she was horrified. Maybe this was the moment she would see the truth. Then she said, "Did Dolores put you up to this?" I blinked. What? Dolores does not like Dylan. She never has. She gives him that look every time he comes in, like he is tracking mud on her clean floor. Jess, this is not about Dolores. I have video. I have a sticky note in his handwriting with a dollar amount and a dealer's name. Dylan has been trying to help you, Mom. He told me the bakery has been struggling. He told me Dolores is probably quitting. He said you are too proud to admit any of it, and he has been looking into how to maximize the value of the inventory so you do not lose everything. That is not what is happening. And you know what? She stood up. Her hands were flat on the wobbly table, and the smiley face cardboard shifted under the short leg. Maybe if you spent less time obsessing over Dad's old recipe book and more time actually running the business, you would not need your son-in-law to step in. That one landed right in the center of my chest. The place where all the soft stuff is. The place that has no armor and never learned how to grow any. But she was not done. I am pregnant, Mom. 14 weeks. And instead of being happy about your first grandchild, you are accusing my husband of being a criminal. I am 14 weeks pregnant, and you are stressing me out with conspiracy theories about a recipe book. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the Waffle House parking lot through the window. Someone out there was ordering scattered, smothered, and covered, and having a perfectly normal Wednesday. Good for them. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I closed it, opened it again. I probably looked like a fish that had just received devastating news, which is essentially what I was. A fish with a peach cobbler and a shattered heart. Mom, I think you should go. Sweetheart, I am not trying to. Go. She pointed at the door. My 21-year-old daughter pointed at the door of her apartment that overlooks a Waffle House and told her mother to leave. And the peach cobbler sat on the counter, untouched, sweating through its aluminum foil like it knew this was not the time. I drove home. I sat in my truck in my own driveway for 20 minutes. The engine was off, the windows were up. The street light on my block has been flickering for 3 months, and the city has not fixed it, so the light kept going on and off and on and off, like even the infrastructure could not decide how to feel about this situation. My daughter had just told me I was going to be a grandmother and slammed the door in my face in the same conversation. I did not know which part to cry about first, so I cried about both simultaneously. Efficient crying. I am a multitasker, even when I am falling apart. I closed the bakery on Thursday. Just did not open. First time in 2 years. Not since the week my father died. I texted Dolores at 7 in the morning. Not coming in today. Can you cover? She texted back one word. Obviously. Dolores texts like she is being charged per character. I have received entire conversations from that woman that contained fewer letters than most people's passwords. She once responded to a 3-paragraph message I sent about a plumbing emergency with the letter K. Just K. Not okay. Not got it. K. And somehow that single letter contained more reassurance than a hug. I stayed on my couch. I wore the same sweatpants I had slept in, the gray ones with the bleach stain on the left thigh from a cleaning incident I do not want to talk about. I ate cinnamon toast for breakfast. I ate cinnamon toast for lunch. For dinner, I briefly considered making actual food, opened the refrigerator, stared into it the way you stare into an abyss when the abyss has leftover Chinese and a questionable block of cheddar, and then I closed it and made cinnamon toast. The cinnamon sugar shaker was almost empty by evening, and I remember looking at it and thinking, this is what rock bottom looks like. It looks like a woman in her mid-30s scraping the last of the cinnamon sugar out of a jar with a butter knife at 6 in the evening, while a home renovation show plays on mute because she cannot handle the sound of other people being happy about their kitchen islands. I watched 14 hours of television that day. I do not remember a single thing that was on. I think at one point there was a show about people buying houses and another show about people selling houses and another show about people who bought a house and now regret it. The entire programming spectrum of American real estate emotions. And none of it was as dramatic as my actual life. Here is what was happening inside my head. And I need to be honest about it because otherwise this story is not real. I was thinking about letting it go. All of it. Just letting Dylan have the recipe book. Letting him sell it to Victor for $52,000. Letting him do whatever he was going to do with the fake lawyer and the shell company and the restaurant chain. Because the alternative was losing my daughter, or my father's recipes, or my daughter's marriage, and it felt, at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday, like those were the only 2 options. Keep the book and lose Jess, or let the book go and keep the peace. Not logically. Logically, I know those are not the only 2 choices. But at 2 in the afternoon, after your pregnant 21-year-old has called you a conspiracy theorist and pointed at her front door, and you are on your 4th piece of cinnamon toast, logic is not running the show. Panic is running the show. Grief is running the show, and both of them are terrible managers. I almost drove to Jess's apartment 3 times. Twice, I got as far as putting on shoes. The 3rd time I actually got in the truck, turned the key, sat there for 90 seconds listening to the engine idle, and then turned it off and went back inside. My neighbors probably thought I was losing my mind. They were not entirely wrong. Maybe it is just a recipe book I said out loud to nobody. Maybe I am being selfish. My daughter is going to have a baby. A baby. And I am fighting over a book full of handwritten recipes made by people's dead relatives. Maybe I should just... I did not finish the sentence. I did not need to. The empty house finished it for me. That is the thing about betrayal that nobody warns you about. The worst part is not the anger. Anger is useful. Anger has a direction, a target, a purpose. The worst part is the doubt. Did I cause this? Am I overreacting? Is this my fault for caring too much about a bakery full of old recipes? Am I the kind of mother who values objects over her own child? I sat with that thought for a full day. It ate through me like vinegar through baking soda, slow and fizzy and corrosive. And the ceiling fan above my couch went around and around and around, and I stared at it like it was going to offer guidance. The fan did not have any advice. Fans never do. That evening, I almost called my father. I picked up my phone and got 4 digits into his number before I remembered. His number does not work anymore. Someone else has it now. Some stranger in Savannah is walking around with my father's old phone number, and they do not even know it. I hung up before it could ring. I stared at the phone for a long time after that. The screen went dark. I did not turn it back on. I am sorry. I need a second with this part. Okay. If you are still with me, and I hope you are, because this story is about to go from bad to are you kidding me, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is right now. I read every single one of those comments. And honestly, on the days when everything feels heavy, those little messages from people in random places at random hours keep me going more than you know. Thank you, truly. All right, that Thursday evening, while I was on my couch turning into a cinnamon toast fossil, my phone rang. Dolores, I almost did not answer. I had been ignoring my phone all day, partly because I was depressed, and partly because I was afraid Jess would call, and I would hear her voice and fall apart even worse. Grace, I need to tell you something. Dolores, I cannot right now. He was here again today. I sat up. Dylan came by the bakery around 2. I was in front. He said you told him to grab something from the back. I did not think I could wrestle him to the ground, so I let him go and I watched the camera. He was looking at other things, Grace. He was checking the copper molds. He was looking at the KitchenAid. He was looking at the Wusthof knives. He was taking pictures again. My cinnamon toast fog evaporated in about 3 seconds. He is not just after the recipe book, Dolores said. He is building a shopping list. Friday morning, Dolores showed up at my house. She did not call first. She did not text. She just appeared on my front porch at 7:30 in the morning with a Tupperware container of buttermilk biscuits and a jar of Tupelo honey and an expression on her face that said we are done feeling sorry for ourselves. I opened the door in the same sweatpants from the day before. My hair looked like something that happens to a houseplant when you forget to water it for 2 weeks. I had not brushed my teeth yet. I had cinnamon sugar on my shirt from the night before, and I am fairly certain there was a toast crumb in my left eyebrow, but I cannot confirm that because I had not looked in a mirror since Wednesday and I was not planning to start now. Dolores looked at me. She looked at the sweatpants, she looked at the cinnamon sugar, she did not say good morning. She did not say how are you. She said, your daddy built that bakery with his hands. Then she walked past me into the kitchen, set the Tupperware on the counter, unscrewed the honey jar, and started talking like she was delivering a closing argument in a trial she had been preparing for 63 years. That recipe book was the last thing Raymond ever wrote in. He spent 30 years filling those pages with every birthday cake and funeral pie and midnight experiment he ever dreamed up. That boy is walking through your life's work like it is a garage sale. And I did not spend 20 years standing on tile floors with knees that sound like a gravel road to watch some 28-year-old in a Hyundai dismantle everything your father built because his credit cards are maxed out. I blinked. How do you know about the credit cards? I do not. But I have been alive for 63 years and I know what a man who is drowning in debt looks like. They get helpful. They get charming. They start asking questions about insurance. She said that last word differently. Insurance. She set it down on the counter between us like it was a piece of evidence. And then she looked at me, and I knew there was more. Sit down, she said. I sat. She pushed a biscuit toward me. I took a bite because when Dolores pushes food at you, you eat it. That is not a request. It is a natural law, like gravity or the fact that bread always lands butter side down. 3 weeks ago, she said, before any of this happened, before the camera footage and the sticky note and all the rest of it, Dylan asked me something. I did not think anything of it at the time. He was in the front kitchen helping me box up an order for a retirement party, and he said, so how does the shop insurance work? I told him it was your policy and you handled everything. Then he asked if individual items were covered separately or if it was all one blanket policy. I said I did not know the details, but that you had appraisals on file for the expensive pieces. Dolores paused. She picked up her coffee and took a sip the way you take a sip when you are deciding how to say the next part. Then he asked, and I am quoting this exactly because I remember it now, he asked, so if something went missing, like if it got lost or damaged, Grace would get the insurance money for it, right? Like, the insurance would pay out the appraised value? I set the biscuit down. I did not put it together until yesterday, Dolores said, when he was in the back taking pictures of everything. I kept thinking about why he was so interested in how many copper molds we had and what the KitchenAid was worth. And then I remembered that conversation about insurance and it hit me like a bag of flour. My hands were cold. not metaphorically. I actually felt the temperature change in my fingers, like the blood had decided it had somewhere more important to be. My heart was doing something that felt less like beating and more like auditing, going back through every conversation, every visit, every casual question, and refiling each one under a new category. Dylan was not just planning to steal individual pieces and sell them to Victor for cash. He was thinking about selling them and then having me file insurance claims on the same pieces as missing or damaged. I would get the insurance payout. He would get the cash. The same recipe book, the same copper molds, the same knives monetized twice. Once through Victor, once through my insurance company, and if anyone ever investigated, if some adjuster looked into the claims and found discrepancies, I would be the one holding the fraudulent paperwork. My name, my policy, my bakery. He was not just robbing me, he was setting me up to take the fall. I sat there for a long time. The biscuit was getting cold, the honey was pooling on the plate. Dolores sat across from me and did not say a word, because Dolores knows when silence is more useful than talking, which is a skill that most people never learn, and she has mastered to an art form. Then she said something that broke the silence, like a hammer through glass. He did not just steal a book, Grace. He stole the story. He got to Jess before you did, and he told her a version of reality where he is the hero, and you are the crazy lady with the recipe book obsession. He did not just take something from your shop. He took your daughter's trust, and he did it on purpose. He told Jess the shop was failing. He told her Dolores was quitting. He rewrote everything so that when you finally came to her with the truth, it sounded like paranoia. I looked at the biscuits. I looked at the honey. I looked at Dolores, who was sitting in my kitchen at 7:30 in the morning with bad knees and perfect clarity, and I thought about what love actually looks like. It does not look like a speech. It does not look like a grand gesture or a Hallmark card or a dozen roses delivered to your door. It looks like a woman who knows you need carbohydrates and shows up with them before you ask. It looks like a Tupperware container and a jar of honey, and the truth delivered without flinching. More biscuits? Dolores asked. Yeah. She cut one open and drizzled honey on it without asking how much. That is love. It does not measure, it just gives. That morning, for the first time in 4 days, I felt something other than sadness. It was not anger exactly, it was focus. Like when you are measuring flour for a recipe you have made 1,000 times, and everything else goes quiet, and the world narrows down to just the scale and the bowl and the exact right amount. I was not a spy. I was not a detective. But I fixed broken things for a living. And my family was broken. And I was going to fix it. Get dressed, Dolores said. We are going to the bakery. I got dressed. When Dolores tells you to do something in that particular tone, the one that sounds like a drill sergeant who also happens to make excellent biscuits, you do not argue, you do not negotiate. You put on pants that are not the sweatpants you have been wearing for 2 days and you get in the truck. On the drive to the shop, I made 2 calls. The first was to Cal Pemberton. I told him everything. The insurance angle, Dylan's second visit, the photographs of the copper molds and the knives and the KitchenAid, the shopping list theory. Cal was quiet for so long, I checked my phone to make sure the call had not dropped. Then he said, Grace, this is not just theft anymore. If he files or causes you to file a fraudulent insurance claim, that is a felony in the state of Georgia. For both of you, you need to get ahead of this. That is what I am doing, Cal. How far ahead? I will call you back. The second call was to Victor Sable. He picked up on the 4th ring, and I could hear him chewing something. Victor is always chewing something. The man eats like a squirrel preparing for a winter that never comes. Victor, the meeting is back on. He stopped chewing. I thought you changed your mind. I did. I changed it back. But I need you to do something extra. When you meet Dylan after he shows you the recipe book, I need you to bring up the other pieces. Say something like, your email mentioned there might be more inventory coming. Maybe some paperwork too. Use the word paperwork. That is important. Why paperwork? Because he is planning something with my insurance policy, and I need him to say it out loud. In my bakery. On my cameras. Victor chewed again. Slowly. Processing. Grace, I sell cookbooks and credenzas for a living. I am not a law enforcement operative. You are not. You are a buyer asking a seller about inventory. That is what you do every single day. You are just doing it in my shop instead of yours. He sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had lived 55 peaceful years buying antique cake stands and vintage copper molds and was watching that peace crumble like a dry pie crust. When? Tuesday, 1 o'clock. I will tell Dylan I am in Atlanta at a supplier. Dolores will be in front. You walk in, talk about the book, ask the questions. 20 minutes. And if he gets suspicious? He will not. He thinks I am a sad woman who is too busy crying over a recipe book to notice he is gutting my shop. That is his blind spot. He thinks I am too emotional to be dangerous. That was the first conversation in 4 days where I sounded like myself. I could feel Dolores in the passenger seat not looking at me on purpose, the way she does when she is proud of something but does not want to make it weird. We got to the bakery at 8:15. First thing I did was drive to Ace Hardware on Victory Drive and buy a new deadbolt for the back door. Dylan's copy of the key from Jess would still work on the front. I did not want to tip him off. But the back door was now mine. If he tried to sneak in through the rear, he would find a lock that did not recognize him. The cashier at Ace Hardware asked if I needed help installing it. I said, I rebuild pie crusts from scratch in a kitchen that is older than most of the buildings on this block. I think I can handle a deadbolt. He looked confused, but supportive. That is the correct response to most things I say. Second, I backed up every frame of camera footage from the past 6 weeks to a USB drive. Then I backed it up to a second USB drive because I am the kind of person who learned from her father that if something is important, it exists in 2 places. I gave one USB to Cal Pemberton. The other I kept in my truck, inside the glove compartment, behind the expired registration I keep meaning to replace and the 7 napkins from various drive-thrus that I keep for reasons that are unclear even to me. I think at this point the napkins are emotional support napkins. They are not functional, they are just there. Third, I photographed every single item in the bakery, worth more than $200. Every copper mold, every vintage knife, every mixing bowl, every cake stand, every piece of equipment with a serial number. It took Dolores and me 4 hours. Her knee was screaming by hour 2, and she sat on a stool behind the front counter and pointed at things while I took the pictures. That one, she said. No, tilt it so you can see the maker's mark. No, the other side. Grace, do you need glasses? It is right there. Dolores, I can see it. The light is bad. The light has been bad in this corner for 15 years. Your father never fixed it either. It is hereditary. Fourth, and this one hurt. I apologized. I sat down next to Dolores while she pressed an ice pack from the mini fridge against her knee. It was not frozen peas. It was one of those blue gel packs that she keeps in the freezer for exactly this purpose, because Dolores is the kind of person who plans for her own discomfort with the efficiency of a military logistics officer. I am sorry I snapped at you last week, I said, when I asked if you had told Dylan anything about the finances. That was wrong. You have been the most loyal person in my life since my father died, and I took my fear out on you, and that is not an excuse, and I know it. Dolores looked at me over the ice pack. Honey, I have been accused of worse by better. Now stop apologizing and start planning. Are we good? We were never not good. But if you ever come at me like that again, I will use this ice pack for something other than my knee. I believed her. Dolores does not make idle threats. She makes promises with a delayed execution date. Tuesday was 3 days away. I could wait. I had waited 2 years to feel like myself again after my father died. 3 days was nothing. I just had to make sure every piece was in the right place. Like a recipe. Measure twice. Bake once. Raymond Holloway did not raise a fool. There was one more thing. One detail that hit me harder than the footage. Harder than the sticky note. Harder than the fake lawyer. Harder than any of it. About a week before everything happened, Jess had mentioned something in passing during a phone call, the kind of thing you say when you are talking about nothing in particular and a thought just falls out of your mouth. She said, Dylan's trunk is so full of junk. I do not even know what is in there. He will not let me look. She laughed when she said it. The light kind of laugh that means I am not actually bothered by this, but I am mentioning it because it is slightly weird. I laughed too. I said something like, men in their cars, and we moved on to talking about whether she should take a summer course at SCAD or take a break, and I forgot about it completely. Until now. I knew what was in that trunk. My father's recipe book. 214 pages of handwritten recipes, 30 years of blue ink and black ink and flour smudges and margin notes about first steps and burned rolls and cakes that tasted like someone's mother's hands. All of it wrapped in whatever Dylan had used to carry it out of my shop, sitting in the trunk of a silver Hyundai Tucson between a gym bag and a container of protein powder. My father spent 30 years writing that book. It survived a kitchen fire in 2007 that scorched the back wall and melted a stand mixer. It survived a pipe burst in 2012 that flooded the storage basement. It survived Raymond's death, which is a thing I still cannot say without my throat tightening, because objects should not outlast the people who made them, but they do, and that is the cruelest kind of inheritance. Now it was sitting in a trunk next to a gym bag that almost certainly smelled like feet and ambition. Raymond Holloway would have come back from the dead purely to express his disappointment. And honestly, I would not have stopped him. I did not sleep well that weekend. I lay in bed Friday night and Saturday night and stared at the ceiling fan and thought about all the things I was going to say to Dylan on Tuesday. I rehearsed speeches. Long ones. Short ones. One that started with "How dare you?" and one that started with "I hope you understand what you have done," and one that was just silence, which in hindsight was the one I ended up using, because the human brain loves to prepare for moments it will completely abandon when the time comes. I know what you are thinking. Why did I not just call the police? Trust me, I thought about it. I thought about it every single time I looked at that camera footage. I thought about it when I found the sticky note, and when Cal said felony, and when Dolores told me about the insurance question. I thought about it while eating cinnamon toast on my couch and while lying awake at 3 a.m. counting the rotations of a ceiling fan that still refused to give me guidance. But here is the thing. That is my daughter's husband. That is my grandchild's father. My daughter is 21 years old and 14 weeks pregnant, and she thinks the sun rises and sets on that man's shoulders. And if I hand camera footage to the Chatham County Police and Dylan gets charged with felony theft and insurance fraud, I do not just get justice. I get a daughter who will never forgive me. I get a grandchild who grows up hearing that grandma is the one who put daddy in prison. I get holidays alone and birthdays through a screen and a silence between me and Jess that lasts longer than any sentence a judge could hand down. There are fights you win in a courtroom and fights you win at a kitchen table. And I chose the kitchen table because the courtroom would have given me justice, but it would have cost me Jess. And I had already lost one person I loved in that bakery. I was not going to lose another. Jess still was not returning my calls. I had texted her twice since Wednesday. Nothing heavy. Just, "I love you," and "I am here when you are ready." Radio silence. Dylan's version of reality was winning. In his story, I was the unstable mother obsessing over antiques instead of supporting my pregnant daughter. In his story, he was the concerned son-in-law trying to help a failing business. In his story, he was the hero. The problem with Dylan's story was that mine had cameras. Sunday morning, I drove to Forsyth Park. It was early, before the tourists and the joggers and the people with dogs that are too large for apartments but too love to leave at home. I sat on a bench near the fountain and watched the Spanish moss move in the breeze, slow and heavy, the way everything moves in Savannah when the air is thick and the morning has not decided what kind of day it wants to be. I did not bring my phone. I did not bring a plan. I just sat there and breathed and tried to remember what it felt like to be a person who was not carrying a secret that could tear her family in half. Monday evening, I went back to the bakery after close. Dolores had already gone home. I tested every camera. I checked the microphone in the office. I positioned the chair in the small room behind the kitchen where I would sit on Tuesday, and I opened the door exactly 3 inches, which was enough to hear everything in the back prep area without being visible. I sat in that chair for 20 minutes in the dark, just listening to the bakery breathe, the hum of the cooler. The tick of the wall clock that has been 5 minutes slow since 2019, and that nobody has bothered to fix because at this point it is part of the family. Monday night, I set my alarm for 5:30. Then I lay in the dark and listened to the house be quiet. Somewhere across town, my daughter was sleeping in an apartment that overlooked a Waffle House, growing a baby she had not planned for, married to a man who was planning to sell her grandfather's life's work for cash, and she did not know any of it. Tuesday was 12 hours away. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep. But I closed them. Tuesday came in gray and thick, the kind of Savannah October morning where the Spanish moss hangs so still it looks like it is holding its breath. The air was warm and heavy, the way it always is down here, like the city is wearing a wet blanket and pretending it is comfortable. I woke up at 5:30, which was technically the time my alarm was set for, but since I had been lying awake since 3:47, the alarm was more of a formality. A polite suggestion from a clock that did not understand the situation. I showered. I brushed my teeth. I put on jeans and a gray button-down shirt that I normally wear for supplier meetings, which felt appropriate since I had told Dylan I was going to a supplier meeting and I wanted the lie to feel authentic, even though the only person who would see me that day was a man who would not be looking at my shirt. I ate half a piece of toast. I could not finish it. My stomach had opinions about today that my brain did not want to hear. I drove to the bakery at 6:45. Dolores was already there. Of course she was. She was sitting on the stool behind the front counter with a cup of tea and a look on her face that I can only describe as judicial. Like a woman who has reviewed the evidence, reached a verdict, and is now waiting patiently for the defendant to walk into the courtroom and incriminate himself. "You ready?" she asked. "No. Good. People who say they are ready are lying. You will be fine." She handed me a cup of tea. It was too hot to drink, but I held it anyway because I needed something in my hands that was not my phone. My phone was going to be busy later. At 8 o'clock, I texted Dylan, kept it casual. The kind of text a mother-in-law sends when she has no idea her son-in-law is planning to sell her dead father's recipe book to a stranger for $52,000. "Got a supplier meeting in Atlanta today. Will not be at the bakery. Dolores is here if you need anything." I added a smiley face. The smiley face felt like a war crime against my own integrity, but I needed him to believe everything was normal. Normal mothers-in-law send smiley faces. Normal mothers-in-law do not set traps. Dylan responded in 12 seconds. 12. This man does not respond to my daughter's texts in under 20 minutes. Jess once told me she sent him a message asking if they needed milk and he did not answer for an hour and 45 minutes. But a message about an empty bakery gets a 12-second reply. "Cool, no worries. Hope the meeting goes well, Mom." Called me Mom. He only calls me Mom when he wants something. Any other day it is Grace, or in his most sincere moments of performative warmth, G, which is not a nickname, it is a letter. You do not get to shorten my name to a single letter and act like it is endearing. That is not a term of affection, that is a text abbreviation. At 12:40, I moved my truck 2 blocks away to Drayton Street and parked behind a coffee shop that I like but never go to because their croissants are mediocre, and I take that personally. I walked back to the bakery through the alley, the narrow one that runs between Broughton and State Street and smells like rain and old brick and whatever the restaurant 3 doors down is cooking, which on Tuesdays is usually gumbo. I let myself in through the new back door lock. The one Dylan's key did not work on. The deadbolt that I had installed myself from Ace Hardware on Victory Drive, because if my father taught me anything, it was that a woman should know how to change her own locks and her own oil and her own mind, preferably in that order. I sat down in the small office behind the kitchen. The door between the office and the back prep area was open exactly 3 inches, enough to hear everything, enough to see a sliver of the room if I leaned forward. The camera monitor was right there on the shelf, and I had the app open on my phone as backup, recording to the cloud. Belt and suspenders. Raymond Holloway did not raise a fool. Dolores was in the front kitchen icing a tray of lemon squares like it was any other Tuesday. She is, I need to say this, an excellent actress. That woman could sell sand in a desert and the desert would leave a 5-star review. She chatted with the morning regulars. She boxed up a half-dozen pecan tarts for the man who comes in every Tuesday at 11 and always says, "These are for my wife, but I suspect he eats at least 2 in the car because the box is always lighter than it should be when it gets home." Business as usual. Not a single thing out of place. At 12:50, Dylan walked through the front door, 10 minutes early, eager. He was carrying a cardboard box, the kind you get from a liquor store, and I could see on the camera that inside the box, wrapped in a blue moving blanket, was a shape I recognized the way you recognize your own heartbeat, rectangular, about 14 inches by 10. The exact dimensions of a 214-page handwritten recipe book that has been in your family for 30 years. He brought it back, He brought my father's recipe book back to my bakery, to my shop, to sell it to the dealer he had found by photographing my appraisal folder, in my building, on my cameras, with my morning baker 20 feet away. There is a kind of audacity that goes beyond confidence. It crosses over into something else, something that does not have a name in polite conversation but lives somewhere between arrogance and stupidity. Dylan was standing in that territory, holding a cardboard box, smiling at Dolores, and he had no idea that the ground beneath him was made of glass. Victor Sable walked in at 1:04. He wore a blazer, which I think was his version of dressing up for the operation. He had his reading glasses on the chain around his neck, and his beard looked freshly trimmed, which meant he had groomed for this occasion, and I did not know whether to be grateful or concerned. He looked like a man attending a funeral he had not been formally invited to. And in a way, he was. "You must be the seller," Victor said, shaking Dylan's hand. His voice was steady, professional. The voice of a man who buys things from strangers for a living and has learned to keep every emotion behind a locked door. Good to finally meet in person. "Yeah, hi Arlo." "Right, thanks for coming out." Dylan called him Arlo. His name is Victor. Dylan had been emailing a fake name from a burner Gmail account, and somewhere in the process, he had used the name Arlo as his own alias. Now he was confused about who was who. That is the problem with lies. They require better memory than most liars have. Victor did not correct him. He just nodded and gestured toward the box on the prep table. "May I?" Dylan opened the cardboard flaps and pulled back the blue moving blanket, and there it was. My father's recipe book. 214 pages. Blue ink and black ink and flour smudges and margin notes. The cover was slightly warped from decades of kitchen humidity, and there was a small coffee stain on the lower right corner from an afternoon in 2011 when my father set his mug down on it and then spent 10 minutes apologizing to the book like it was a person. I know about the coffee stain because he wrote about it on the last page. Spilled coffee on the cover today. The book did not complain. I should be more like the book. I could see it through the 3-inch gap in the door. I could see the warped cover and the coffee stain and the edges of the pages where the ink had bled through on the recipes he had written hardest, the ones where his pen had pressed down like the words mattered more than usual. I could see all of it, and I could not move. Not because I was scared, because I was holding something inside my chest that was very heavy and very still, and I knew that if I moved too fast it would come out as something I could not control. Victor picked up the book carefully. He turned it over in his hands the way a man handles something he knows is valuable and does not want to damage. He opened it to a middle page and scanned the handwriting. "This is a remarkable collection," he said. "Original handwriting throughout, period annotations, personal marginalia. This is not a recipe book. This is a primary source document." Dylan nodded. He was bouncing slightly on his heels. Nervous energy. His voice was higher than normal, the way it gets when he is excited about something and trying to pretend he is not. "Yeah, it has been in the family for years. Generations, actually. Generations. My father started that book in 1989. That is one generation. Dylan had just promoted it to plural. Inflation comes for everything, even family history." "And this is from the same collection you emailed me about," Victor asked. "The Holloway collection?" "Yeah, family collection. We are downsizing, liquidating some pieces, you know how it is." He said we. Like it was a joint decision. Like he and I had sat down at a table and agreed that selling my dead father's handwritten recipe book to a stranger was a reasonable Saturday afternoon activity. We. That word sat in my chest like a coal. Victor nodded slowly. "And the value you mentioned in the email, $85,000 on the appraisal, that is the documented figure?" "That is what the paperwork says. But I am flexible. I know dealer pricing is different. I am not looking for full appraisal. Just fair." Fair. He wanted fair. The man who stole a book from a locked safe in his mother-in-law's bakery wanted fair. I almost laughed. Not the funny kind. The kind that comes out when your body does not know what else to do with the pressure. Victor set the book down on the prep table gently. Then, exactly as we had planned, he said the words. "Your email mentioned there might be more pieces coming. Maybe some paperwork involved too." Dylan glanced toward the front of the bakery. Through the doorway, Dolores was visible, head down, working on something at the counter. She did not look up. She did not need to. She knew exactly what was happening 20 feet behind her, and she was giving the performance of a lifetime. If the Academy gave Oscars for pretending to ice lemon squares while your employer's son-in-law incriminated himself in the next room, Dolores would have a shelf full of gold statues. Dylan lowered his voice, but not enough. The camera microphone in the office picks up everything within 15 feet of the desk. I had tested it twice. I had tested it 3 times, actually, because I am the kind of person who tests things a 3rd time just to be sure, and then spends 10 minutes wondering if she should test it a 4th time and then does. Yeah, Dylan said, so there is a bunch of stuff in there worth 6 figures total. I have got the appraisal numbers for all of it, the copper pieces, the knives, the vintage equipment, and the insurance policy covers everything individually. So, if something goes missing, like, if it gets reported as lost or damaged, she would get the insurance money for it anyway, so it is not even really... He stopped. Not because he realized what he was saying. Not because some flash of conscience lit up the back of his brain and told him to shut his mouth. He stopped because he heard something behind him. A small sound. A creak. The specific creak that the office door makes when someone pushes it open from the inside, because the hinges have needed oil since 2014, and I have never gotten around to fixing them because there was always something more important to do, and now I was grateful for every single day I had neglected those hinges because that creak was the loudest 3 seconds of my entire life. He stopped because he heard the office door open behind him, and the bakery, which had smelled like butter and vanilla and lemon squares all morning, suddenly smelled like nothing at all. I stepped into the back prep area, and Dylan's face went through about 4 stages in 2 seconds. Confusion first, the kind where your brain receives information it was not expecting and needs a moment to file it. Then surprise, which is confusion's louder cousin. Then recognition, which is the part where the filing is complete and the result is not good. And then something I can only describe as the expression of a man who has just realized that the ground he is standing on is not, in fact, ground. Grace? His voice cracked on the 2nd syllable. I thought you were in Atlanta. I was not in Atlanta. Victor took a very deliberate step backward. He moved the way a man moves when he wants to be in the room but not in the story. He folded his hands in front of him and examined a spot on the ceiling with sudden and intense interest, like the ceiling tiles held the answers to questions he had not been asked yet. I did not yell. I want you to know that. I have heard people tell stories like this. And the hero always yells, always delivers some devastating one-liner that makes the audience stand up and cheer. Always stands tall and victorious, with the wind blowing in the right direction and a soundtrack swelling behind them. I did not do any of that. My voice came out quiet, almost flat, like the air had been let out of it, and what was left was just words with no decoration, going from my mouth to his ears in the straightest possible line. That recipe book is the last thing my father ever wrote in. He spent 30 years filling those pages, every birthday cake, every funeral pie, every midnight experiment that did not work, and every one that did. He wrote notes about my first steps in the margins of his pecan shortbread. He wrote about Dolores burning her first batch of rolls on page 41. He wrote about a woman whose cake tasted like her mother's hands, and he did not understand what that meant. But he kept the recipe because it mattered to someone, and you wrapped it in a moving blanket from your hallway closet and put it in your trunk next to a gym bag. Dylan started talking fast, the way people talk when the words are coming from the panic center of their brain and bypassing every filter between thought and mouth. I was getting it appraised for you. I was trying to help. I have been trying to help this whole time, Grace. The bakery is struggling, and I thought if I could get some of the pieces valued, we could figure out. I held up my phone. The camera app was visible on the screen. The red recording dot was pulsing in the corner like a heartbeat. I have you on 4 cameras, Dylan. Going through my desk, photographing my appraisals, carrying that book out the back door on Tuesday. And just now, standing right here, talking about selling my inventory and filing insurance claims on the same pieces. It is all on the cloud. It is backed up on 2 USB drives. One of them is with my accountant. The rehearsed speech, the helpful son-in-law routine, the concerned voice and the tilted head, and the carefully constructed version of reality, where he was the hero trying to save a struggling business. All of it collapsed. Not slowly, the way a building settles. Fast, the way a house of cards goes when you pull the one at the bottom. His face went white. Not red, not angry, white. the color of a man who has just done the math and come up short. He tried one more thing, the last card in his deck. He softened his voice. He tilted his head the way he does when he wants to sound sincere, the way he tilted it the first night he came to dinner and complimented my shrimp and grits, the way he tilted it every Saturday when he brought gas station coffee and asked how he could help. Grace, think about Jess. Think about the baby. We are about to be a family, and if you blow this up, do not. I said it quietly. I said it the way you close a door when you are done. Do not you ever use my daughter to negotiate your way out of what you did. Do not use my grandchild as a bargaining chip. You came into my bakery. You sat at my desk. You stole from my family. And you tried to set me up to take the blame for insurance fraud. Your meeting, your emails, your plan, all of it is on my cameras. In your own words, you built this, Dylan. Every piece of it. The bakery was so quiet I could hear Dolores breathing in the front kitchen. And somewhere on a shelf behind me, the wall clock that has been 5 minutes slow since 2019 ticked over to 1:15. Even the clocks had timing. I gave him 2 choices. Return the book. Delete every photograph from your phone right now, in front of me, in front of Victor, and never set foot in this bakery again. Or I hand the footage to the Chatham County Police, and you can explain to a prosecutor why you were selling stolen property and discussing fraudulent insurance claims on camera. You pick right now. Dylan looked at Victor. Victor was still examining the ceiling. Dylan looked at the back door, the one with the new deadbolt he could not open. He looked at the front, where Dolores had appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, ice pack, nowhere in sight. She looked like a woman who had been waiting 63 years for this exact moment and intended to enjoy every second of it. He pulled out his phone, opened the photo gallery, deleted them one by one while I watched. 19 photographs, some from my appraisal folder, some from his second visit. Pictures of the copper molds, the KitchenAid, the Wusthof knives, the porcelain cake stand. I made him show me the recently deleted folder and clear that too. Then he put his phone in his pocket with the slow, careful movements of a man who understands that the next few seconds will determine the rest of his year. He picked up the recipe book from the prep table. He wrapped it back in the moving blanket. Carefully this time. Gently. Like it suddenly mattered. Like the pages inside were fragile and important, which they always were, but he had not noticed until now, because some people do not understand the value of a thing until they are being forced to give it back. He placed it on the counter in front of me. Then he walked toward the front door. Dolores stepped aside just enough to let him pass, but not enough to be comfortable about it. He had to turn sideways. She made him turn sideways. That was deliberate. At the door, he turned around. I thought he was going to say something. An apology, an excuse, a threat. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he left. The brass bell my father hung above that door in 2003 chimed once and went still. Dolores locked it behind him. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I will be." The bakery was quiet after he left. Not the normal kind of quiet, the kind that happens between customers when the ovens are cooling and the front door has not chimed in 20 minutes. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that fills a room after something has been removed from it. Like the air was rearranging itself around the space where Dylan had been standing, and it needed a moment to figure out the new configuration. Victor was the first to speak. He cleared his throat the way a man clears his throat when he has just witnessed something he was not emotionally prepared for, and needs to signal that he is about to transition back to being a normal person. "Well," he said, "that was something." Yes, it was. He picked up his blazer from the back of the chair where he had draped it during the transaction that was no longer a transaction. He put it on slowly, adjusting the lapels with a kind of precision that suggested he was using the task as a way to avoid making eye contact. Then he looked at me. "Your father would have handled this differently," he said. "My father would have hit him with a rolling pin." Victor almost smiled. Almost. It was the kind of smile that starts in the eyes and then thinks better of it and stays there. "Exactly," he said. "Take care of yourself, Grace. And take care of that book." He left through the front door. The brass bell chimed. Dolores locked it again behind him, and then it was just the two of us in a bakery that smelled like lemon squares, and something that felt like the beginning of the rest of my life, which is a dramatic thing to think, but I had earned a dramatic thought. I had been living in a thriller for 2 weeks. I was allowed one moment of internal poetry. Dolores and I put the recipe book back in the safe. It took both of us, not because it was heavy. A 214-page book does not weigh much, maybe 3 pounds. But some things you should not carry alone. Some things need 2 sets of hands, not for the weight, but for the meaning. Dolores held the safe door open while I placed the book inside. I set it down gently, the way you set down something that has been through a journey and deserves to rest. Then I changed the combination. New numbers. 4 digits that only I would know. I am not going to tell you what they are, but I will tell you they are not a date and they are not a birthday and they are not something anyone could guess by knowing me. They are something my father said to me once that I never forgot, converted into numbers using a system that only makes sense if you grew up in a bakery where a man measured love in teaspoons and time in the smell of bread. I closed the safe. I turned the dial. It clicked. There. I know what you are thinking. Why did I not just call the police? I told you before, and I will tell you again because it is important. That is my daughter's husband. That is my grandchild's father. There are fights you win in a courtroom and fights you win at a kitchen table. The courtroom would have given me justice, a prosecutor, a charge, maybe a conviction, but it would have cost me Jess. It would have cost me every holiday, every birthday, every first word and first step that my grandchild will take. My daughter would have become the woman whose mother put her husband in prison, and that story would have followed her and the baby for the rest of their lives. I chose the kitchen table because the kitchen table lets people come back. The courtroom does not. Cal Pemberton called me at 2:30. I answered on the first ring because I had been waiting for it and because I had nothing left to wait for. How did it go? It went. That bad? No. That complicated. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You did good, kid. Your father would be proud." Cal has called me kid since I was 22 and walked into his office with a shoebox full of receipts and asked him to do my taxes. I was not a kid then, and I am not a kid now, but there are some people who earn the right to call you something soft, and Cal is one of them. Dolores made tea. Not coffee, tea. She pulled 2 mugs from the shelf above the sink, the mismatched ones we use when it is just us, the blue one with the chipped handle for her, and the white one with the faded Holloway's logo for me, and she brewed 2 cups of chamomile without asking if I wanted any. She set mine on the counter next to the cooling rack and sat on her stool with her ice pack on her knee, and we sat there together in the empty bakery and did not say anything for a long time. "He did not just steal a book," I said finally. "He stole the narrative. He got to Jess before I did, and he told her a story where he was the hero and I was the crazy mother obsessing over a recipe book. He rewrote everything." Dolores took a sip of her tea. "Stories can be rewritten," she said. "You would know. Your father rewrote recipes for 30 years. Never got it right the first time. Always made it better the second." That evening, after Dolores had gone home, after I had wiped down the counters and checked the cameras and locked the new back door and turned off the display lights, I stood alone in the bakery. The front windows were dark. The ovens were cold. The only sound was the wall clock ticking 5 minutes behind the rest of the world, the way it always has, the way I hope it always will. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Jess's name. I stared at it for 2 full rings before I picked up, because I wanted to answer, but I also did not want to cry the second I heard her voice. I needed a moment to convince my tear ducts to cooperate. They reluctantly agreed. "Mom." Her voice was small, not angry, not guarded, small. The way it used to sound when she was 5 years old and had a bad dream and stood in my bedroom doorway holding a stuffed bear by one ear, the one with the missing button eye that she named Professor Buttons for reasons she could never explain. Dylan told me what happened. I waited. "Can I come by the bakery tomorrow?" I closed my eyes. The tears came anyway. They had apparently not agreed to anything. They had just been waiting for the right moment, and this was it. "The door is always open, sweetheart. It has always been open." She hung up without saying goodbye, which normally would bother me, but I knew what it meant. It meant she was crying too, and she did not want me to hear. We Holloway women are stubborn about our crying. We got it from Raymond. I stood in the bakery alone for a while after I hung up. The phone screen went dark. I did not turn it back on. The only light in the shop was coming from the back prep area, where the small fluorescent above the sink was still on because I always forget to turn it off, and at this point, it is less of a light and more of a permanent resident that does not pay rent. I walked to the safe. I turned the new combination slowly, feeling each number click into place the way my father taught me to feel things, not with speed, but with attention. The door opened. The recipe book was inside, exactly where Dolores and I had placed it. Slightly warped cover, coffee stain on the lower right corner, edges soft from 30 years of kitchen air and flour dust. I carried it to the prep table and sat down under the fluorescent light and opened it to page 1. Chocolate pecan pie. My father's handwriting was young on that page, certain. The way handwriting is before life teaches you to hesitate. The ink was blue, the measurements were precise. And in the lower right corner, in smaller handwriting where the coffee stain had not quite reached, he wrote, Grace's favorite. She asked for this every birthday since she was 4. Never get tired of making it. Never will. I read that note 3 times. Then I pressed my palm flat against the page the way you press your hand against a window when someone you love is on the other side and you cannot reach them, but you want them to know you are there. Then I got up. I tied on my apron. I turned on the oven. And I started baking. I measured the butter by weight, not volume, because volume lies but the scale always tells the truth. I cracked the eggs one-handed because he taught me that on a Sunday morning when I was 12, and he guided my wrist and said, trust the shell, it wants to break, you just have to show it where. I melted the chocolate slowly in a double boiler, stirring with a wooden spoon that has a burn mark on the handle from 2009 when I left it too close to the burner and my father said, now it has character, just like you. The pecans went on a sheet pan to toast, and I watched them turn golden through the oven window, the way I have watched 1,000 things turn golden in that kitchen. The smell came first. Chocolate, dark and slow, filling the room the way music fills a room, not all at once, but in layers. Then the pecans, warm and sweet, mixing with the butter and the vanilla and the old wood of the prep table and the specific scent of a bakery that has been alive for more than 20 years. And for a moment, just a moment, I could feel him standing somewhere behind me, not watching, not checking my work, just there, quiet and steady, like the hum of the ovens, like the smell of butter, like things so constant you forget they are there until one day they are not, and the absence is louder than any sound you have ever heard. I did not turn around. I did not need to. Some people you do not need to see to know they are with you. My father used to say that every recipe tells 2 stories, the ingredients and the person you made it for. I think about that now. I think about how the things we make with our hands carry pieces of us inside them, invisible and permanent, like flour worked into dough. I think God puts people in your life to teach you things you could not learn alone. My father taught me how to bake. Dolores taught me how to stand back up. And Jess, my beautiful, stubborn daughter who believes in the goodness of everyone even when the evidence suggests otherwise, she is teaching me that loving someone means leaving the door open even when they have walked through it going the wrong direction. Especially then. I believe God gives us broken things so we can learn what we are made of, not just the breaking, the putting back together. The moment you realize the crack does not ruin the thing, it just means it has a history. My father's recipe book has a coffee stain and warped pages and 30 years of kitchen grease in the binding, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever held. Not despite the damage, because of it. And I believe God gives us kitchens, not just to feed ourselves, but to find each other. Every birthday cake is a declaration. Every funeral pie is a prayer. Every midnight experiment is an act of faith that says, I do not know if this will work, but I am going to try, and I am going to try with butter, which is the most optimistic of all ingredients, because butter believes everything can be improved with enough heat and enough patience. Sometimes you lose things. Sometimes people take them from you so quietly you do not hear it until it is almost too late. But sometimes, if you pay attention, if you watch the cameras and read the sticky notes and listen to the woman who shows up with biscuits before you are ready to face the day, you get them back. Not unchanged, but back. The pie came out at 11:42 on a Tuesday night. I set it on the cooling rack next to the window where the streetlight makes everything glow. The bakery was empty. The ovens were off. The clock was still 5 minutes slow. Someone left a comment on my last video that said, these stories remind her to pay attention, not just to the big things, but to the small ones, the sticky notes, the questions that do not quite make sense, the people who get helpful out of nowhere. That comment stayed with me. If this story found its way to your heart, I am right here in the comments. Tell me. I read every one. And on the days when the bakery is quiet and I am standing in the kitchen wondering if any of this matters, those messages remind me that it does. Another story is waiting on your screen. Whenever you are ready, click it. I will see you there. The bakery still smells like butter and vanilla, and something you cannot quite name. The safe is locked. The recipe book is inside. And tomorrow morning, when my daughter walks through that door, the first thing she will smell is chocolate pecan pie. Her grandfather's recipe. Made the way he taught me, the way I will teach her, the way she will teach the baby. Some things you do not let go of. You pass them on.